So I would like to start by thanking all the people who have shown interest and have registered to the webinar. It's a very, very exciting topic which we wanted to discuss today. I know people have been tracking the web application security and how the industry is reacting to the new OWASP Top 10. That is something which we wanted to discuss and also share our knowledge and our experience being an industry practitioner to the forum here and give some inputs and also take some questions, feedback as how the new OWASP Top 10 is going to change or influence the landscape of web application security testing. I probably will take a couple of minutes just to introducing Cyrax and myself, and then we will move forward. So Cyrax, as you all know, it's an acronym for Cyber Security Risk and Advisory and Consulting Services. We are a 3.5-year-old organization. We've been in the industry for 3.5 years. Currently, we have 250 plus clients. We have close to 500 engagements, and we've been working with different verticals, predominantly with the fintech and NBFCs and banks where the regulation is stringent and where the activity of making sure they are secured and safe when it comes to their application and then infrastructure and so forth. Our engagements have been in India, North America, and Middle East. So we are a pure play cybersecurity consulting services company. We help organizations in the area of governance, risk, and compliance, where we help them to, build their security and data privacy frameworks. If they want to adopt to a standard, we help them as an extended arm. We also provide audit services, assessments, and so forth. The other big vertical, what we cover is the technical services. In technical services, we do our vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. Let it be the web application, API, infrastructure, anything which falls into the gamut of vulnerability assessment. And we being, again, a certain empaneled vendor, we've been working with many organizations who want to safeguard their application security or their infrastructure and so forth. So today's topic actually alludes us to that particular web application testing. So that is something which we will discuss in detail with our panel. So what I want to do next is to just pause here to show our signature services which we provide. I can share more information about what Cyrax does and how we help our customers, but we will straight away jump into the introduction to our team who will be interacting with you. We're going to have Suresh Iyer, who is the co-founder and CEO at Cyrax. He'll be talking to you, sharing his views about the new OWASP Top 10 and how it's going to change the web application security standard. I also have Suresh. He's the Vice President of Technical Services at Cyrax. He will be giving his views. He has a lot of experience in architecting application and also doing security architecture review of application. So I'm also looking forward to hear from Suresh Ponnuswamy about what he feels about the new OWASP Top 10. Anamika Patil is a manager, and she also runs the technical services for application testing and infra testing at Cyrax. She has been hands-on with our clients, and she's been interacting with many challenging projects which we've been working. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over this conversation to the panelists, and they will take it forward from here. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you guys have any questions, you have a chat window. You can go ahead and shoot those questions. We will try to take those questions at the end of the seminar. Over to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manoj. And good afternoon yet again to see and talk to you on yet another webinar. Uh, it's a pleasure to talk to you all on a topic that's very current and very relevant to the industry here. On about the recent surveys that have happened, everyone is now talking about application and application exploit as one of the biggest threats. I think with infrastructure related vulnerabilities that are available for exploits nearly done away with, are when we talk about the recent breaches, we find most of the breaches have been using application exploits and not necessarily on infrastructure exploits. And with the migration to cloud, the infrastructure related exploits have even come down further because of a fairly robust infrastructure provided by the cloud service providers. Now, that gets back to the application area and what is application security and what are the standards that define that. And that's probably what this discussion is going to be. Joining with me, Suresh Ponnuswamy and Anamika, both of them more active practitioners in this space. And that's what we'll be talking about today. We'll probably have some slides as a placeholder for some discussions, but otherwise we'd like to keep this a free-flowing, simple conversation and hopefully be of use to you. And I'm also, just like Manoj, wanting to hear from Suresh about his views on many of those topics of interest. Yeah. So essentially, for any posture, the posture for a cyber attack is done on three pillars: prevent, detect, and respond. So, the typical question is, in application security, why OWASP? So there are other standards like NIST, CIS, and SANS. So, question here, Suresh, where would you deploy a NIST, where would you deploy a CIS, and where would you deploy a SANS? And how do you think that OWASP has taken the top place for the application security context?
That's a good question, Suresh. Hi, everyone. So when we look at application security or the security platform as it is, during the initial days, during the early late 90s and early 2000 times, most of the attacks were based on the infrastructure, and applications weren't being given the enough focus to start with. And with the advent of websites and web applications coming into the mainstream usage, the focus started shifting into web applications. That's when a lot of injection attacks and other categories of attacks started coming into picture. So when we look at the earlier standards such as NIST or CIS, they were focusing on the infrastructure or the components of the application layers, whether it is systems or network. So the focus was to see how they can secure those areas first and then later move on to the applications. But when the applications started taking the mainstream, the focus became much more relevant, and OWASP came into picture. So that was the history for OWASP to become a mainstream standard for application security.
So way back in 2000 and the early 2000s and mid 2000s, what was the kind of security checks that were done in an application?
So when OWASP started, the first iteration came out in 2003. So when we look at the past 6 iterations of OWASP, the issues that are predominantly coming into picture were like injection attacks or cross-site scripting attacks or configuration errors. So there weren't much of a focus on the application design or cryptographic issues. So those issues started taking into the top 10 category towards the later part of the OWASP top 10 cycle.
Okay. So it's when probably from the 2013 revision is when the most adopted that became sort of a de facto standard by the penetration testers
Yes.
and the testers to say that we will start adopting OWASP Top 10 as a mandatory.
Yes. So when application security started becoming mainstream, and when the major chunk of the process were to look at the web applications, that's when OWASP started becoming the de facto standard. So there were a lot of thoughts around the initial OWASP standards saying that it doesn't cover enough ground when it comes to the security threats. But then they started adopting, and there were multiple revisions that were released over a period of time. As I had mentioned earlier, there were like 6 revisions which had gone through, and now they have started becoming more and more focused on the application security design and other cryptographic issues that have taken part in the test cases.
Okay.
So to talk about the history of OWASP, it started as a non-profit organization in 2001, and it was formed by a consortium of various companies, and it started looking at the application security landscape as to in the individual issues which can be focused upon when they do the testing part. So they released the first version in 2003, followed by 2004, 7, 10, 13, 17, and now we are at the 7th edition, which is 2021. So it has gone through and it has become a kind of accepted standard when it comes to web applications, and it also helps to enhance the secure software development lifecycle process of any organization. So when it comes to secure coding practices or security design and architecture, so there are various categories in OWASP, like there are builders, breakers, and protectors, where you go ahead and focus only for developers, testers, and for infrastructure and operations guys. So we look at various categories. There are checklists that have come into picture that they have to follow and get trained so that you can build a better and secure applications.
So it's no longer an aftermath. It's actually do it at the design stage. Secure by design, and OWASP has started talking about all of that right now.
Exactly. So when it comes to application security, the earlier thought process was it was always an aftermath. So they develop the application when it's about to go to be released into production. That's when they will be doing the security testing. But with the recent advancements and the high-profile incidents that has happened with various applications and websites and organizations, it has become much more important to have this as part of the development DNA. So security is no longer looked at as a separate pillar, but it has to go hand in hand with your development lifecycle, your coding methodologies, and the entire lifecycle of the application development. Not only looking at the development, but also looking at your testing, your operations, and your implementation. So the entire lifecycle of any application, right from your conceptualization to the release, from your to the market, right from your design stage, has to be looked at from the security view. And OWASP actually has fantastic standards, checklists, and processes which will help you to achieve that.
Okay. So what has essentially changed between 2017 and 2021? This is probably going to get a little technical for the teams, but essentially this is a tech webinar, and for all the tech enthusiasts, let's start discussing more about what are the key changes and how is it going to benefit overall the industry. Can we dwell a little more on that to find out what has been the key changes?
Sure. So when we look at the OWASP top 10, the focus has always been on the implementation side. So when you implement any controls in your application to mitigate the threats, so you have to look at what are the key areas that you have to focus on. Like take for example an injection attack. So it can be a SQL injection, it can be a command injection. So likewise, there have been like various iterations as we have gone into to see how it has developed over a period of time. So after the implementation and the guidances that have been given by OWASP has been followed and taken into account, the high profile incidents that has happened shifted the focus to some new areas which was actually seen as out of scope or outside the purview of the top 10 list. So one such important addition to the recent 2021 list is the insecure design. So when we talk about design, they tell, I would like to take an example. So you can have a fantastic in-house security in your house, and if you fail to lock your main door, you are vulnerable to attack. So it's as simple as it sounds. So we have to take care of security from the design perspective. However strong be the implementation, but still there could be a chance that you will be compromised because of your insecure design. So that has kind of encompasses all the other issues into one single element.
So so to demystify the word insecure design, what are the key ingredients that take about what an insecure design? What would you qualify as an insecure design, or on a contra basis, what would you qualify as a secure design?
Okay, so when it comes to the application security designing, so there are a lot of architectures that are available which are followed worldwide, which are like defense in depth concept or secure by design, privacy by design, and now the latest buzzword, which is again a software defined perimeter, which is again coming into zero trust architecture. So there are a lot of various architectures which are to be looked at based on the basis requirement, what kind of data that it has to protect, whether it is PII data or financial data or healthcare. So you pick and choose according to your business requirements and then go by what would be best suited for your development methodology, and then you delve into how to develop a application with more secure features.
So threat modeling.
Yeah, so we have a lot of practices which will guide you. So as I said, like security has to become part of your DNA when you start to develop the applications. So you have to look at the secure design aspects. So right requirements gathering, you have to start identifying the threats that can come into the application. So you have to do threat modeling, you have to follow secure coding practices, you have to follow security code reviews. So the entire set of activities that you do as part of your development lifecycle will constitute to much better and secure software. So that is covered as part of your insecure design, or in other words, to have a secure design for your applications. So the other new category that has come into picture is the software and data integrity failures, wherein your previous top 10 categories have been merged and formed into a new category. And another new addition to the latest 2021 OWASP top 10 is the server-side request forgery. So I would like Anamika to talk a few words about server-side request forgery.
We'll cover that in the coming slides.
So why don't we take about, see that there are a number of breaches that have happened. Could we pick on the specific breaches on these things, on these three new concepts built in by OWASP Top 10 now that's coming into effect, and correlate that to some of the large breaches that have happened? And that's probably would give an idea about what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So as we have seen, insecure design has become a catastrophic event in 2018 when the Meltdown and Spectre issues were discovered in the Intel's line of processors. So going by the breach, the processors that have been manufactured in the past 20 years are vulnerable to these attack categories. So when you have a secure operating environment provided by hardware vendor, which is Intel, where your applications are going to run, whether it is a secure or security enhanced Linux, or even fully patched and configured and hardened Windows operating system, it really doesn't hold the fort, because there is an underlying layer which is having a design flaw, which was actually caused by too much abstraction in terms of Intel's way of putting it at. So, with respect to meltdown, when you look at it, any program that is running in an application space can read the kernel space by exploiting the flaws that were introduced by the meltdown and inside the processor architecture. So now when we look at it, the design issues which are beyond the control of an application developer or an operating system provider or an application vendor could cause the application or the entire operating environment to fail. And in the case of Spectre, one application can read the memory space of another application, which is again a very catastrophic flaw that was discovered. And in such cases, there was not it was not easy to patch it, because it required changing the instructions that are microcode update to the processors, but that was not possible. So almost all the operating system vendors in the world, be it Microsoft, Red Hat, Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, Mac OS, everyone had to roll out additional security measures in the software, which resulted in downgradation of the performance. So there are reports that says that the performance of the processor has gone down as much by 30% because of the additional measures that have been put in by these operating system vendors. So such things actually are could have been prevented if Intel would have been a bit more cautious about the abstraction that it had got into the handling of the CPU instructions. So this is a classic example of an insecure design, which has resulted in a much larger and wider damage to the operating world.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the software and data integrity failures, I hope everyone would have known or heard about the recent SolarWinds hacks, which happened in 2020. So the Orion suite of products was compromised because of a DevOps pipeline being open to the world. So now what that had caused was for a malicious actor to inject a backdoor script into the one of the most widely used and adopted software, which was used to manage the infrastructure and security. So going by the documents that were released, close to 33,000 customers were using the SolarWinds management suite for managing their security and infrastructure part. So out of that, close to 18,000 customers have been affected by this particular infected version. So it was actually signed by the SolarWinds certificate authority, and it was used as a supply chain attack methodology by which a backdoor was installed, and it had affected even the US government sites, top healthcare, and most of the Fortune 500 industry were affected because of this hack. And why? Is because of a simple data integrity check failure in one of their pipeline. They were exposed and they were able to come in, modify, and inject a code which could go into their mainstream application, and it got released as part of the update process, which got installed, and that was used as a backdoor or a hack channel through which they were able to exfiltrate data or cause further damages. So this is a classic example how of a simple an integrity failure in one of your pipelines could cause a widespread damage. So that's again one of the high-profile incidents we would like to see discussed a lot under the data integrity failures and cryptography-related issues.
Yeah, no wonder those are key drivers why and the consortium felt it important to add in data integrity failure as an important check to certify that application is secure now, right?
Yes. So the sensitive data exposure is a category where your server-side components get compromised to expose unwanted information. So now, when you look,
so just to for the tester community, this is standard lingo.
Yeah.
I'm talking about some of the I can see some of the teams who are regular practitioners in security, but they are not active testers today. So what's a client side and what's a server side? How do you classify that? Just a context on that, and then we can probably.
Sure. So when we take any web applications, you have a client access part, which is your front end, which runs on your web browser or on your mobile browser or on your mobile application. And there's a backend that sits at the application provider server side code, where it handles all the business logic and database communications and all other integrations and interconnections between various third-party systems. So when it comes to executing an attack, an attacker can try and steal information from any application by exploiting the flaws in any of these two categories. Either a client-side attack, where I'll try to steal data with the client's actions and whatever is being present at the client side, whether it's at the server side, whether it's at the browser side, or at the application side. So when it comes to the server-side part, the attacker will try to inject certain things which will be executed in the server's context and at the server-side machines or systems where it's handling the data, and then try to exfiltrate the data from that location directly outside.
So, for example, transactional data or privacy data that is present across. The standard practice is you should never have anything on the client side. It should always be fetched from the server and then pushed across to the screen.
Yes.
And the client should not have any, and the client application should not have any residual data present in that. So that's one side.
Yeah.
Now, going beyond now server-side data exposure, how is that going to make a difference now in the way application checks are being conducted?
So typically when you talk about the client-side data being not present, but when the client tries to access the data, it still needs to have a view that has to be presented to the client. So any part of the data which is owned by that particular client or where he has access to work on it will still be available at the client side. But when we go to the server side, the boundary of the data access can be broken by combining with other injection attacks or command injection or SQL injection kind of attacks.
So that the escalated and then get access to a ton of information
exactly
from the server side.
Server side part. So by that you'll be able to extend your damage potential to a much wider data category. So, and that's one of the key areas which has been highlighted in the newer version of OWASP Top 10. So, going by the widespread occurrence and the nature of damage that these attacks have caused from the last release, which is 2017 to till date, it has kind of made the consortium to look at and highlight and bring it into the top 10 category so that it becomes one of the key checks for any application developer or an organization to look at and then decide. Now we have to look at design, we have to look at the integrity failures, we have to look at the server-side request forgeries that can happen to be part of the OWASP Top 10.
Okay, so I think Suresh has briefed about the examples which were pretty good about insecure design, software and data integrity failures and SSRF attacks. I would just like to highlight the main reasons why this occur. So from my point of view, insecure design, I think one of the major factors which contributes to insecure design is lack of business profiling risk at the early stage of software or system development lifecycle. And in those stages, we are not able to determine the exact level of security which is required at your prior stages of development. So in this stage, I think the use of threat modeling, as you rightly pointed out, for your critical authentication, access control, business risk, and key workflows would prevent these kind of scenarios. The next one which we have is software and data integrity failures. One of the major examples in this category, which I see nowadays, is where applications are allowing automatic update as a feature for many of the users, wherein the updates are getting installed automatically. Many of the applications are relying on plugins, libraries, and third-party components from untrusted sources. Okay, so lack of integrity check for these third-party components, and if the updates are getting installed automatically, we do not have a way to verify the integrity of these components.
So when you are doing a check or as a tester, so you are doing tons of application testing. So you with now the check on OWASP top 10, what you would do is you would say that you have been accommodating updates from untrusted sources in your updates, and therefore this feature is insecure. Change this feature. That will help you to build higher security. That would be your recommendation now.
Yeah, majorly that. And one major recommendation we also provide is usage of digital signatures. So that is a way to verify the integrity of the components which are being used or downloaded as part of this. That also prevents tampering or replay of your serialized data in a way. So that avoids the integrity violation that can occur by using these components.
Okay.
The last one which we have is the server-side request forgery. Now, these type of scenarios usually occur when the web application is trying to access a remote resource without properly validating the client-supplied URL. I think Suresh rightly pointed out the difference between the client-supplied inputs and the server-side validations. So we have a small video presentation prepared to demonstrate this vulnerability. I'll just be playing that.
Go off slide and then go back to video.
Yeah, I'm on video.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Okay, so here we are trying to access the admin directory inside an application. Now, majorly admin, user, all these are default directories which are always present inside the web root of your application. So when we try to access the admin directory, we get an error saying that only administrators are able to view this kind of directory. So we know that this directory exists. Suppose this as a normal user, how we can exploit this SSRF flaw and gain access to the admin resources is what we are trying to demonstrate, where we are intercepting one of the requests which talks about the stock ID and the product ID. Here we observe that the input as stock API field is going as a URL which is trying to fetch a product ID. So now that I know this is being accepted as a URL, we'll try to craft a malicious URL to access this admin directory through localhost. After sending the malicious crafted request, we observe that the server will respond with the success message, and we'll get the list of users which are currently active inside that application. Here we can see there are 2 users. Now we are trying to perform unauthorized access basis on a user role. So as we see there are 2 users, we'll try to craft a delete request to delete one of this user.
How an innocuous error in program leads to a fairly catastrophic damage to your application by the hackers, what they try to do.
Yeah, so once the request is processed by the server, we'll again go and check the list of users which we had as part of the application, if the action is triggered or not. So here we see only one user is remaining within the application.
So you have successfully injected a code to delete the user by using the exploit feature on the SSRF.
Correct. Yeah, we basically crafted a request which is an unauthorized access which we are trying to give.
So you don't need to know the password, you don't need to know the credentials. You can go fetch who the user is and delete because of this exploit feature that is there in the application.
Correct. I think majorly for these type of vulnerabilities, we need to sanitize and validate the client supplied data and inputs and enforce proper URL schemas. And I think, as Suresh also mentioned, defense in depth is the proper strategy to mitigate these type of vulnerabilities across your application as well as network layer.
Okay.
We can talk about threat modeling.
So what, considering this, Cyrax has taken this as a minimum guideline and the baseline for offering our web application vulnerability assessments, penetration testing on the web app, on the mobile app. We also do secure code reviews, which is either it's automated or even if required, the manual code reviews, which can provide more insights into business logic flaws that are embedded in the in the application, right? And more importantly, we spoke about threat modeling. Now, how threat modeling becomes a very important stage. So, companies that are building applications need to focus on this as a very important aspect so that the application that's finally getting built is secure. And Cyrax is also launching cybersecurity training services, and we will be launching that service very, very soon, probably soon after Diwali, and where we will be providing these services of training, ethical hackers and many training services that we want to offer, which can help improve the overall the company's organization posture by having the right people in the right job doing with the right skills, and for the testing community to get certified through the training services of Cyrax.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Suresh P and Anamika. We have another 4 to 5 minutes to take quick questions. So I'm probably going to go and start reading it out from the chat. There have been many. We'll try to answer as much as possible. So. Okay, sorry. One question what I see is OS Top 10 created for web application security testing only, or that includes any recommendation for API testing and infrastructure as well?
So they do have API testing standard, which can be used specifically for APIs. Not only APIs, they also have a standard for mobile applications. And they don't have for infrastructure because that is getting covered in the other.
Ideally, for infrastructure, CIS benchmarks provide you a very, very good standard to build and create and maintain and sustain for CIS standards. Organizations keep various, it depends on the number of assets you have. A typical asset size of 100 servers. Right. Organizations would typically look at 90 plus percentage compliance and 95% plus compliance on CIS benchmarks. And it's important to set those benchmarks. It's important to build the infrastructure with standard builds and things like that. Those are options that help. in getting the requests.
Okay. Another quick question they wanted to know is how false positives are negated when doing pen testing and how important it is.
Very nice question. Who want to take that?
Sure. So, coming to this question, false positive removal is basically done when your automated scans are completed. OWASP has a very good list of checklist, rightly said, and also guidelines for us to verify the vulnerabilities manually. And majorly, what we have observed is nearly 50 to 60% of your vulnerabilities, which comes as an output from your automated scanners, are false positive. So it is, I think, very important for us to more focus on manual testing. And when we are doing manual testing, we'll in the flow also identify the false positive which are reported by the scanners.
Okay, great, thanks. So there's another good one, I think. This one's talking about having a good WAF, web application firewall itself.
Can you read out the name of the person who's asking it?
Okay, it's from Gopal. He is asking, having a good web application firewall itself should protect the web applications. Why do we need web application penetration testing?
I think it's a great question. I probably give some context around it. So does have a WAF help you say that? So there are a lot of questions like this. I'll add another question. So here's one question that I was faced by one of the leading companies. They were actually launching an application, and they were saying, "Why should I actually get a VAPD done? I'd rather do a red teaming exercise." So it was akin to saying that, so look, there's a small little hole in my wall that I know that I need to fix, but expecting whether can a missile attack happen from outside? So that's the level of comparison. Now, what happens on the web app? Web application firewall. Web application firewall is designed to identify the most common patterns of attacks and try to prevent them from happening. Now, the one that gets through an automated scan, which is the simplest black box test, gives you saying that there are a million scripts that are there in that tool that executes them. Over and above that, when you do a complete penetration testing, these testers would go through a series of checks which are far, far higher than what an real-time WAF can do. Real-time WAF can prevent the most common signature patterns that are available. I'm not negating that as not having a WAF is not a good option. Have a WAF, because it helps you immediately arrest them. But having a web application testing completed before launch of every release of your product is probably far more crucial and important. Any points you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would like to add upon what Suresh had mentioned. So think of a scenario where your application is exposed and protected by a web application firewall. So what does it prevent? It prevents the implementation level security issues at the firewall level. But when it comes to the design level security issues or the business use cases, which is insecure by design, the WAF doesn't care or it can't even identify. Take an example category where I'm accessing a bank's website. I'm trying to download my statement by giving a account number in one of the form fields. I can give another account number and I'm able to access the account statement of another account. This scenario doesn't get detected by WAF because for it, the entire request is perfectly fine. It doesn't, ring any bells or it doesn't, raise any alarms. But when it comes to a cross-site scripting or a SQL injection kind of a categories, that's where the WAF will kick into place and then it will say, hey, there is an injection attack that has come into picture. So this is a simple example of why we need to have a proper web application penetration testing or a vulnerability auditing to ensure that your application is safe.
Yeah. So that's the right armor. WAF is important, but having WAF alone would give you a false sense of armor, and that we would caution against.
There are a few more questions, Suresh. I think we little way past the time. I probably will close it with one.
We'll take on one or two questions.
Yeah. So Trishikesh has put a note saying, I hope he wants to understand what is session hijacking versus session fixation.
Okay. Anamika, would you like to explain that?
Yeah, sure. So session hijacking typically would meant where you are hijacking another user's session or taking over other user's session. So that would deal with two multiple session IDs and replacing that. Session fixation, you would fix on a session ID which is being assigned to you at early stages. Maybe this is a very vast topic to cover, and this is also mapped to your session management, which is part of your OWASP, which we can read out through.
Sure. Thanks, Anamika. And I think there was a generic question about the OWASP. How do they determine these are the critical ones? I mean, how does that happen in the background? Something.
It's a consortium that provides quite a lot of information. So there is every one of you or in the community that contributes to it. And that's how they build, and also by the most common occurrences of various breaches that have happened. So that's how this is getting built as the most important components.
Okay, so we'll take a last one. This is again talking about one of the new entry to the top 10.
Yeah.
Insecure design.
Could you tell the name of the person who is asking? That's probably.
Yeah, Raghavendra has asked this question. Okay. So. It's a new category, insecure design, and the question is how this particular control is going to be implemented, and how do you think various organizations are going to protect their application from the insecure design? I think we spoke about it in detail, but that's one of the questions.
Yeah, to give a very brief answer, so adopting security as part of your entire development lifecycle, trying to do a threat modeling, adapting to secure code practices, secure code reviews would actually help you to address the insecure design category.
Great. I think there have been few other questions. If we were not able to, answer these questions, I will definitely ensure that, drop your email IDs to us. We already have. If you have, I think one last question just popped out. I think we will take that. How any fresher or entry level associate have an experience of all this penetration testing environment? This is from Rishikesh.
How any fresher or entry level associate have an experience of all this penetration testing environment? It's impossible, So. However, there are these labs that are available for you to take benefit about, or work with companies like Cyrax, which gives you an option to test all these environments.
And I think the other good thing is about the training, what you get out of, let's say, a C8 certification, where they walk you through these examples sometimes. And as Suresh said, if you are interested, drop us a note. You can go to our website and see what opportunities we have. And then feel free to drop us a note to your profile. And if we think, it suits our requirement, you fit the bill, why not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I think with that note, it's been a great interaction with you all, and thanks for the panel who took time out to explain the new top 10 and what impact it's going to have on the web application testing. And we will definitely come back with another webinar where we dig deep into this conversation. And take care and stay safe.
Thank you very much for being in this webinar. We enjoyed talking to you. If you have any questions, feel free to write to us. Our website has the details. You can write to suresh.iyer at cyrax.com, and we'll respond to you. And whatever questions that you may have, please do. Very, very happy interacting with you, and thank you very much for the time. So,
Thanks everyone
Thank you,
for the time.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.